There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, if you will, we're going to call to order the City Council study session, Tuesday, December 6th, 2022. First item on the agenda is a discussion regarding affordable housing, including tax credit programs. And Mr. Beavers?
In a brief introduction, we were able to find Mr. Darrell Beavers, the director of the Oklahoma Housing Finance Agency, through some friends of ours, Wanda and Byron Bruler, who just have an amazing Rolodex in the arena of affordable housing. And Wanda and Byron and Karen Canavan from the Housing Authority and Lisa Craig from our Community Development Block Grant Program and Mr. Richard McCowan had met with Darrell and his team to talk about the opportunity to develop a tax credit financing affordable housing project here in Norman. And we thought we can keep talking about it among ourselves, or we'll just go right to the guy who has all the answers for the whole state of Oklahoma. And Darrell, we appreciate your responsiveness and your ability to come participate and help educate us. We do recognize it's a lot to consume, especially since we as a group haven't been here before. The last conversation I had with Mr. Richard McCowan on the subject, very interested in doing such a project, and he walked away recognizing, I don't want to do this alone by myself for the first time. I would rather partner with somebody who's been down this road on numerous occasions and gain that expertise over time. And I thought there was wisdom in what Richard had shared. So we were hoping for a tax credit financing 101 for all of us to kind of get up to speed. And Karen has an opportunity on the sidelines that we think might fit this particular program. So Darrell, take it away.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you for the invitation to come and present the Affordable Tax Credit program to you. This is a federal program, and by the way, I'll introduce myself. My title is Housing Development Director at the Housing Finance Agency. I've been there for about 30 years, and so I'm starting to kind of understand the tax credit program now. So what I've got is a few PowerPoint slides here to take us through it. This program was started in 1986. Congress enacted it in order to get rental housing built around the country, either newly constructed or rehabilitated, and to provide affordable rent rates to people that were at 60% or less of area median income. That's the federal tax credit. And there's two types of federal tax credits, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. There's a 9% and there's a 4%. Additionally, Oklahoma decided that there ought to be a state tax credit as well to supplement the federal one. So they enacted that in 2014. These tax credits provide a 10-year reduction in tax liability for the developers who newly construct or rehabilitate affordable rental housing that is both income and rent restricted. What the developers do is they typically cannot use this tax credit on their own tax return. So what they do is they convert it into money. They convert it into equity, okay? And they do this by selling that tax credit to wealthy individuals, Fortune 500 companies, and various other investors. And the money that they get from that, they use to lower their financing costs. In other words, it allows them to have less debt on the property. With less debt, they're able to hold the rents down, and that's how we help people at lower incomes. In the state, since the program was started in '86, there have been a little over 40,000 housing units produced or preserved in our state. And I can tell you that from around the country, the tax credit program really amounts to about 25% of all new construction. So it's a huge program. a huge program. Without it, we really would have a lot less affordable housing out there. So that's kind of generally how it got started. Something I do want to mention is that if you go to our website, ohfa.org, and you go to the developer financing tab, all the information that I'm going to give you today is contained there, especially in the application that we have out there. That's how developers apply to us for this financing. There is also another tab there, a funded development database that will give you all of the funding that we have done over the years, all the developments that are still currently operating. And then there's also a developer list, or a list of developers that participate in the program. It's not out there on our website, but it is available if you were to ask us. So that's some of the basics. Now, how does this actually, let's talk about how it actually works, talk about some of the math. This tax credit provides between 65 and 90% of the total development cost for a project. So you can see in this pie chart up there, tax credit equity provides a lion's share of the financing for a development. The loan, the mortgage loan, the hard debt is only about 20%. And then there are other monies that account for about 10%, soft debt, grants, things like that, okay? The requirement of the residents is that they have to earn 60% or less of area median income. And we'll talk about what those numbers are here in just a second. So what kind of properties can you build or rehabilitate with this tax credit? Well, you can do new construction. You can do adaptive reuse. Big thing nowadays throughout the country is taking old elementary schools, turning them into housing, typically for elderly persons. Taking schools and converting them into housing. And so, you know, a lot of that is being done. Acquisition and rehab. Rehab of historic buildings. And you can do single or multifamily, either one. The types of buildings that we finance are apartments, duplexes, single-family homes that are for rent, and then assisted living. We can't do nursing homes, but we actually can do assisted living.
Let me interrupt you, Councilman.
Yes.
Sorry, I do have a question with that. So we've talked about purchasing like a hotel and then converting it. Would that qualify for this
Yes.
type of thing? Okay.
Yes, and that is one thing that's going on throughout the country right now. With during the pandemic, a lot of hotels, struggled and have been sold, and a lot of entities have bought motels and hotels and converted them into affordable housing. So that's a big deal that's going on right now.
And Councilmember Foreman, I'll forward you an article that the DeBrulers forwarded me on successful hotel conversions going on around the country. So timing's perfect.
Right. Okay. That's the kind of real estate that we can do with it. Now. There are, as I mentioned, there are the 9% credits, and then there are the 4% credits. And the 9% credits are very competitive. They are, and there are maximums. What happens is the federal government block grants to the state a certain amount of tax credits that they can issue. It's so many dollars per person in the population, okay? So there is a maximum that we can issue. The 4% credits, there's an unlimited amount that is out there, okay? And what the Internal Revenue Code says is that if you will finance at least 50% of the cost of your development with tax-exempt bonds, then you are eligible for a 4% tax credit. And so we are lucky in the state of Oklahoma in that we have a lot of tax exempt bond cap, a lot of bond issuance authority. There are many states that have already allocated all of theirs. We're fortunate in our state that we have a lot. So we have a lot of bond cap. We have an unlimited amount of 4% credits that are out there. So it's a very powerful resource. Now, a 9% credit is worth more, almost twice as much as a 4% credit, okay? So financially, the 4% credit is not as powerful, but it's easier to get and there's no maximums on it. So you can probably tell I'm pretty high on bonds and 4% tax credits. So we're going to talk in just a second about the state tax credits too, because that makes that bond and 4% credit more powerful and brings it closer to being able to compete with the 9% credits. So let's talk about some math for a minute. Comparing the 9% and the 4% tax credits. If we have a $10 million project and we minus out $1 million for land or other ineligible costs, that leaves about $9 million that you can get credits on. You get 9% for each year of a 10-year period, okay? So that's $8.1 million in credits that a developer can get. He's going to sell that for, the price fluctuates, but it's usually somewhere between 80 and 90 cents on the dollar. Let's just say 90 cents for round numbers. So he's going to get $7.29 million on a $10 million project. That's powerful. I mean, that's powerful. That allows him to walk into the bank and say, I have a lot of equity in this project. Will you lend me some money? And the banker sits there and looks, wow, a really, really low loan-to-value ratio. I'll do that all day long, okay? So it makes it easier for them to get mortgage financing. On the 4% tax credit, same project, but you only get the 4% credit. You end up getting $2.5 million in credits, so it's significantly less, okay? But once again, it's easier, faster to get, etc. So how can we fill that gap? You know, how can we fill that gap? Well, luckily, our state legislature saw fit to pass a state tax credit back in 2014. And what they said was we will allow for you to issue up to $4 million in state tax credits each year for a 10-year period. Okay, just like the federal credits.
Daryl, how oversubscribed is that $4 million on an annual basis?
Well, it's very popular. Yes, it can get oversubscribed. But I'm going to talk in just a second about how it has been married up with the bonds and 4% credits. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So here it is. What we have done is tried to marry the two together. We think that the 9% credits are very powerful. They don't need the help of the state tax credit, but the bond and 4% deals do. So we changed our application for 2023 and going forward, and we have 2 funding periods a year in the 9% program. You apply in January and you hear in May whether you've been awarded or not. If you don't get awarded, then you can turn around and apply in June and you'll hear in November. What we say is the state tax credits will be available for both new construction and rehab. And for the first funding period, okay, all $4 million of the state tax credits will be available to bond and 4% deals only. In the second funding period, if there is money left over and unused from that first funding period, then it will be available to both 9% and 4% applicants, but priority going to the 4% deals, okay? And the limit on how much a developer can get is 2 million of that 4 million. So in a yearly basis, the most of the developer can get is 2 million, okay? So, the state tax credit goes together really nicely with the bonds and 4% credits. As to issuing the bonds, we have to be the issuer of the bonds. Yes,
Just a real quick, the 2 million cap, has there ever been a instance you know of where two single developers got all of the money statewide in a year? Or like all the money went to two separate projects, but only to two separate projects, and it wasn't like divvied out?
I'm trying to remember. I don't think it ever actually has that I remember. But it is possible that it could be just two with this setup the way it is now.
Daryl, it couldn't in the past because the program was designed differently.
Yeah,
This money, they only had 2 million in the pot before.
right.
The other thing, Daryl, you might mention to them that if you apply for the state tax credit in the 4%, then you go competitive.
Right.
Instead of just
right.
the straight 4% bond, you can get that all day long. You
Yeah.
add this in and you're competing
Yeah, with the 9%.
with the 4% because you're moving it to 4%.
No, I thought you were talking about combining the state tax credit with the 9%. No, okay.
No, with the 4 you did previously. In
Yes,
2023,
yes.
it's going to be all with your 4%.
Correct.
And you guys put a rating factor, you know, you have that
Right,
rating factor on those 4 if you do it with the 4% now,
right, exactly.
which is all new.
Yeah, this is all, we've changed it a lot. It's all new.
Yeah.
Yeah, wondering about, if there's one project in Tulsa and one project in Oklahoma City, and those get all the whole state money for the year, is that?
It's possible. Yeah, it's
They get
entirely
out by
possible.
2 projects, but 3
Yeah.
can easily consume all of them.
Sure.
Right. We have a team of bond professionals that the state requires that we RFP for. There are 4 professionals that are required to do a bond deal. You have to have an underwriter, you have to have a bond attorney, you have to have a trustee bank, and you have to have an independent third-party financial advisor. And so we have all of those in place. They have done many deals for us. They do a great job, et cetera. So we've been really happy with what they've done. Now the state tax credits, I was talking about the 9% credits getting commanding 90 cents on the dollar or so. The state tax credits don't get quite as much. They get about 50 or 60 cents on the dollar. Whole lot of reasons for that, both known and unknown. I think investors are just more comfortable with the federal credits. The state credits are pretty new. I keep thinking that the price will go up over a period of time, but for now, they're worth less to investors. Let's see. Let's talk about the income limits and the rent limits. So Cleveland County is in the Oklahoma City MSA, and the area median income is $85,300. And these numbers are published by HUD. Okay, so this is what we go by. For a 4-person family, the most that they can make is $49,140 a year to qualify to live in tax credit housing. Okay? And then on the right-hand side, you'll see the maximum rents per bedroom. And for instance, a two-bedroom apartment, the most that could be charged for rent is $1,107 a month. Now, that is if the rents include utilities. Obviously, most of the time they don't. So you have to minus out a utility allowance, and there are HUD charts that we go by. And so that rent, that maximum rent limit may be quite a bit less than that. And typically is because most people pay the utilities themselves, not the landlord. Okay, so how does a developer obtain the credits? They're going to make application to us. The award maximum is $900,000 per development. I'd say that's something new that we did. It used to be $750, now it's $900. I mentioned the two application cycles. And then you'll see down there that the 4% tax credit applications have to be received at least 60 days before a board meeting that we have. And we have our board meetings on the odd months. So we have board meetings every other month. The 4% tax credit application, if it's submitted in conjunction with a state tax credit, it will follow the 9% application cycle deadlines. So if you're doing just bonds and 4% credits, you can do it about any time of the year. You just come in at least 60 days before a board meeting and apply. But if you're going to include tax credits with it, then you revert back to the 9% schedule. There are many entities that can apply for these tax credits: for-profit developers, nonprofits, public agencies, units of local government, tribal governments, etc. Most of our applicants are private developers, and we have quite a few that around the state that participate in the program. So, what's our allocation? Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just gotta go back to that median income number.
Okay, so I have a question about that.
Yeah, that does seem extremely high is that individual? Because our median family income in Norman is only $62,000.
Right. These are HUD published numbers. And the 80,
Seems, really
yeah,
for an individual.
that number, if you take a straight 60% of the 85.3, you're probably not going to hit right on.
It's $85,300 what they're saying is the median income of a single individual in the metro area?
Well, it's of a family.
Family, okay.
Yeah.
So when we go like, I don't think, okay, it's like, is that
Yeah.
single individual? It's a family, okay.
Right.
But even that's significantly higher than Norman's family median income and Oklahoma City and Moore's.
Right.
Just
Those
from
Edmond guys, Jack.
Edmond and Nichols Hills, I guess. But yeah, I just was unclear about
Yeah.
what that metric
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's HUD
It's like-
published numbers.
I have a question on
Dallas.
that. So in Norman, are we using that number?
Yes.
Like, so Oklahoma City, so like some podunk, small town, like they still have to like,
Right. And the numbers will be quite a bit different. Yeah.
but they don't have their own number. They're using Oklahoma. They're using this.
No,
85.
they have their own numbers.
Okay, they have their own. Okay,
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
isn't
yeah.
the standard for
Yeah.
everyone. I was like, that's
There's-
unfair.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. No, there's
Published by county,
yes, by
Okay.
county.
Okay.
based on family size.
So that's the county, not just Oklahoma City. I don't have my
Well-
glasses. Like
Well, it's Oklahoma City MSA, which includes Oklahoma County, Cleveland County, Potawatomi,
okay.
the whole bit.
Even then, those rents are still. Even the efficiency is more than my mortgage. Like,
Yeah.
Dang, okay.
But that number's gonna be quite a bit less once you back out the utility allowance.
You could have a utility allowance of anywhere from $150 to $250
Yeah.
or more.
Well, the
And that-
latest one I got was $300 in Yukon.
So you would take that rent and subtract that utility amount, that becomes your net rent, the rent that you can actually charge.
Right.
Okay.
It seems
Right.
like rents in Norman go for about $10 a foot, depending on
It's really high. What was the, Lisa, are you behind me? What was it, the percentage of your income, if it goes
30.
to housing?
The goal is you don't want to spend more than 30% of your income towards housing.
Right, right.
I was gonna say our home-based study kind of laid out what our apartments go for here. Like you have to have an hourly housing wage of $17.62, and that's roughly about $720 to $900 for a 1 to 2 bedroom apartment here. So
And Daryl, in your experience, if other opportunities like municipal government participation, there wouldn't be a reason or if there were other dollars to be invested to buy down the cost of the project, that's the maximum the rent could be, but the rent could be less than that.
Well, yes, that's correct. And oftentimes developers find that the tax credit alone, okay, is really not enough to really help finance the project. So they will look at other sources of financing, grants from foundations or endowments, or there's entities like the Federal Home Loan Bank that can put money into a deal. And so, developers try to make the tax credit pay for the lion's share of it, but oftentimes it's still not enough.
Ms. Canavan?
I think what your concern is, wow, that's still a lot of rent.
Mm-hmm.
And we call it affordable housing. That's something that Lisa and I have talked about for years, that the tax credit, it's affordable for someone, but it's not affordable for the lower income people. But with that being said, you could project base some vouchers out there, Section 8 vouchers,
Sure.
to help
Yeah.
people with
Right.
those rents. And that way
Right.
you can still keep the higher rents to cash flow the project
Right.
and make it more appealing. So there's
Right.
another option for you.
Okay.
Yeah, many tax credit developers accept Section 8 vouchers. And they're usually, the tenant-based vouchers and everything. There is some project-based assistance out there, but most of it is tenant-based.
Daryl, the other thing you didn't mention though is with the changes in the tax credit nationally with income averaging, that there's
Right.
that possibility that the city may want to look at where you could, in a complex, you could serve households up to 80% and as low as 30%. And those rents would be different. So depending on your income drives what you pay for the rent. Your unit and my unit might look exactly alike, but if our incomes are different, then your rent is going to differ from my rent in that
Right.
development.
And what she's referring to is this income averaging is that the idea is that not every person that lives in the unit there has to, that you have to use the 60%, okay? There are some people that can go up to 80%, okay, of area median income, as long as they are offset by an equal number of people that are below 60%, so that the average ends up being 60%. So that is yeah. Income averaging is
Complex.
yeah, it's complex. Yes,
Very.
yes, very much so.
But it's an option.
Yeah. It is an option. It becomes kind of a nightmare for your management company to keep track of who's earning what, and everything like that. But it can be done. Okay, so to get credits, developer applies to us. They have to pass a threshold requirement. If it's a 9% deal, they have to earn a score that's higher than other competing applicants. And I will tell you that the 4% credits you do not have to score, okay, since you're better than your other applicants out there, because it is non-competitive, okay? But if it's a 9% deal, you have to outscore other applicants. So what do? Well, we analyze the application to make sure that it meets the federal IRS code. We make sure that it passes our rules and meets our application. We do an underwriting, much like a banker would, and I'll talk about that in just a second. And then finally, we have a compliance function. We have a staff that goes out. We are required by the IRS to go out and inspect every property once every 3 years. And what we're doing when we inspect is we're looking at the records that the property management company maintains, and we're making sure that all the tenants in there are not making over the income limits, and we're making sure that the owner is not charging over the maximum rents. And then thirdly, we're making sure that the property is in good physical shape and it's safe sanitary housing, okay? So we do that. It's a pretty rigorous process. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
Councilmember.
Is there a time frame window for where these are, what's the word I'm looking for, basically, recourse? Like when you get historic tax credits, you're not able to do anything to the building for 10 years or you have to pay those credits back.
Right.
Is there a similar function with these kind of credits? Like you're not allowed to raise the rents?
Well, okay, so the period that these tax credits are on the property, these restrictions go for at least 30 years.
Okay.
Okay, so that's something that a developer is committing to, is he's getting a lot of money up front, but he has to restrict the rents and he has to restrict the incomes of the people that live there, everything for 30 years.
With a caveat, but in order to compete and be competitive for those 9% credits, there's a scaled system of affordability, a period of affordability. So to score maximum points on that particular criterion, you're looking at 40 years.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the look right there.
Yeah.
And are they transferable?
But be happy, in other states it's 99 years. Wow. So it can be a lot worse.
Yeah. Now, a developer can sell their property at any time during the period of affordability. But as you can well imagine, they've taken most of the financial benefit up front. Mm-hmm. A buyer is not going to get much, and the buyer is handcuffed with meeting these restrictions, okay? So these properties don't change hands a lot, okay, until they get a long ways into their affordability period, and then you see them start, changing hands after
That
that.
would seem like a good thing. Does that work out? Because if they're not changing hands and rents aren't getting juggled around and all kinds of other stuff, it would seem, from the consumer side, it would seem like that was a good thing. Am I reading that correctly?
Well, we hate to see developers come in and buy the properties at the end of the life cycle because lots of times they take it market rate, and then the housing is not affordable to people anymore. They can raise the rents. They can rent it out to people that are making more than the 60% of area median income. So we always hate to see that, but it's done all the time. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just going to mention that's I think something we're seeing a lot in Oklahoma City. A lot of older apartment complexes that are 30, 40, 50 years old are now being bought by out-of-state corporations.
Right.
And slight improvements are being made, but rents are being jacked up significantly to where and they're not, some of them are now not accepting Section 8 anymore, so those people are gone. And so
Right.
that can be the, parallel. Maybe those units were built years ago using federal credits or whatever.
Yeah. We have a requirement if you're gonna buy a property and rehab it and get tax credits to do that, you got to spend at least $30,000 a unit doing it. You can't just do a cosmetic rehab.
If you're gonna,
Yeah. You got to do a substantial
And you
rehab.
have to accept Section 8 referrals.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's required.
Yeah. You can't turn people away just because they have a Section 8 voucher. I mean, that's law. Okay, so let's talk for a second. We mentioned the threshold and the selection. So in the threshold, you have to come up with an independent third-party market study that's prepared that shows that there's a need for this housing. You have to have capacity and prior performance, okay? In other words, you have to have experience. We'll talk about that in a second. Financial feasibility and viability. We do not allow the cost per square foot to be greater than $230 a square foot. The developer fee that's allowed is 15% on a 9% deal, but you can get up to a 20% developer fee on a 4% credit deal. There are limits on the contractor fee. There is a 5% construction contingency that's allowed. You have to have 6 months worth of reserves. Your debt coverage ratio has to be at least 1.2. And so these are some of the things that we go through and look at, much like a banker would when we're doing an underwriting on the project. And then fourthly, you have to show readiness to proceed. The property already has to be zoned. You can't come into us and say, well, we've made application for zoning. Or, the city really seems to think, they seem to like this rezoning we're doing and we think we're going to be successful. Nah, it's got to be zoned, okay? We've seen too many of those things go south. Site control. You've got to have site control. You either have to have a deed to the property, you have to have a purchase contract, you have to have an option to purchase, or you have to have a long-term lease that's longer than the period of affordability. In other words, over 40 years typically. And then you also have to give us preliminary site plans and floor plans, not construction drawings or anything like that. Just give us a site plan and floor plans. Capacity and prior performance is the one thing that trips up most developers. There are a lot of developers out there that know how to build apartments, okay? And this is not about construction. It's not about knowing how to construct apartments. It's about knowing the program, because the program is very complicated. Section 42 of the Internal Revenue Code is the single largest section of the Internal Revenue Code, okay? And so it's complicated. And developers have to understand it and they have to know it, and they only get that by doing it, okay? And so they've got to have experience. So how does a developer, if he doesn't have experience, how does he get into this industry, are we just creating a good old boy club? Well, we're trying not to. He can get the experience a couple of different ways. To begin with, he can partner with somebody that does have the experience. Or he can surround himself with people, architects, engineers, contractors, etc., that have experience with at least 5 developments. Okay, so there are ways to get into this business. We haven't shut it out for anyone. For a developer that does not have experience, personally, I think the best way to get it is to partner with a developer that does. Split the developer fee, okay? And then, on your next deal, you're off to the races and you're good to go. So, selection. Several factors here. Remember, this only applies if you're doing 9% credits and you're trying to compete against other applicants. You get points if you target lower incomes. If you agree to rent to people that's 50% or less of area median income, whatever, you get points for that. Development location. If you're in a qualified census tract, a QCT, or a DDA, a difficult to develop area, or a high opportunity area, or you're in proximity to certain amenities, and then there's certain population growth. Development location, you get points for that. Energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is something that we like to see because it holds the costs down, for people, and it allows them to be able to make their rent payment more ably. Amenities, we like for there to be certain, there's a whole list of amenities that are in our application. And then finally, development cost efficiency. We really have a series of things in there that you can get points for if you are efficient in your costs. And so that's really it as far as threshold and selection. And then compliance. We don't need to talk a lot about compliance. I already said that we go out once every 3 years and inspect the property. So that's it in a nutshell. And I mean a real nutshell, because there is just a lot more to it. But if you do have a tract of land here in Norman that you would like to see affordable housing built on, whether it's apartments, single-family homes, or whatever, the tax credit program is a great program to entice developers to do that. And it can be a local developer that has not had any experience in the tax credit program, or it can be a seasoned one. If you want to contact some of the developers that participate in our program, we can provide you with that list. We're not in the business of recommending one over another. We just make the list available to you, and you can come to your own conclusions.
Councilmember Schultz.
I guess my question is back to the threshold, which is like capacity and prior performance. So as a municipality, Councilmember Foreman was talking about us maybe purchasing a hotel to rehab and turn into affordable housing.
Right.
If we haven't done that as a municipality before, do we have to partner with somebody else to do that?
Yeah, you would have to partner with somebody else, or you would have to surround yourself with the individuals that are listed in our application, or the entities that are listed in there. And you're going to have to, make sure that they have the proper experience. And once again, we can give you a list of those individuals. We can give you a list of the developers, et cetera.
So would that look like us doing something like that in our RFP process to say, like, this is the person that's going to help us rehab this within that project, needs to be compliant or have done, have prior experience to dealing with these tax credits?
So I see two potential opportunities, and actually the hotel piece that I know Catherine's office is waiting on the opinion of value on. The thought that 4% money is not competitive, a municipal government could apply, monetize that 4% tax credit since we're tax exempt, and help further buy down the cost of a hotel project, for example. The other opportunity on a vacant piece of land, 4.5-ish acres in a qualified census tract, in a relationship with the housing authority, and then, bring together a package of developers. And if a local developer component is important to council, so you know who you're doing business with, maybe to partner with somebody with more experience, and maybe they compete on the 9% side, maybe the 4% and the bond money with some affordable housing support, buy the piece of real estate, maybe cover the cost of sewer, water, all the utilities to the site. I think we could attack both. And maybe it's one RFP to help assemble our affordable housing team in the private sector.
Yeah, it just seems like there's a potential opportunity for us to maximize, especially when we're talking about our ARPA money and getting more bang for our buck for multiple projects and more units and all that kind of stuff. Like, this sounds like an opportunity for us to be able to do that with those dollars.
Leverage. We
Yeah.
love it.
Would you use the ARPA money to buy the land?
It's a possibility because I mean, council has money in the bank. It's programmed for affordable housing. We don't want to misstep and spend the money in a way that negatively impacts an application. But it is an opportunity where we could go tie up that real estate tomorrow, and then potentially bring back platting, have it zoned and
Right.
all that's and ready to go, but while we're working on the relationship with the developer side.
Sure.
To do the vertical construction.
Is Canada.
But you have to be able to compete. And even though the 4% is not competitive, you may want those state credits. And if you do, then you're going to find yourself back in that competitive mode. And Daryl, help me out. Don't let me get out over my skis much here, but the typical applicant is not a unit of local government. It is a
Right.
for-profit or nonprofit entity. The city or the governmental role is that of an incentive provider. Someone to, he said 90% of the project's paid for with equity, but you got a huge 10% piece here. And that's your opportunity to be the secondary bank, the soft bank, that makes the additional dollars available to close that gap. And you would have to, you would want to also be very careful about how you provide that monetary incentive, because if it goes in as a grant, then that can create a taxable event for the developer, which they do not want. And so typically it's put in as some kind of soft loan, interest only, deferred balloon payment at the end. And just thinking ahead for you guys, what that leaves you with then is a return of that investment down the road.
To do it again.
And not knowing the rules of ARPA or anything, it may come back to you as colorless money, lose its federal identity, and there you have the seed money for a local housing trust fund to do project after project after project going forward. Sort of like what you do with CDBG when you get program income, except it would be colorless money with no regulations attached to it. So you want to be careful about how you make those investments and how you remove those barriers. And it could come in the form of land, but before you took down the land, you would want to go through a rating process. You would want to do a self-score under both the 9% and the 4% to see how competitive your application might be. Might be that you have to make some changes in your approach that you hadn't contemplated just in order to be competitive.
So just as we're thinking about ARPA, because that seems to be the pot of money that we have at our discretion to do this, how feasible, I'm looking at Mr. Francisco, how feasible is it for us to leverage that in a way that could see dividends for years? Or do we have to purchase it in such a way?
Text sidebar conversation with our legal counsel.
There's a lot of Morse code eye blinking going on. So.
I just see the...
I think our opportunity, because this is newer territory for us, a couple of thoughts. If there is interest in council getting into this particular opportunity, and I do see it as an opportunity to leverage with a return to do it again and again, how do you create that self-fulfilling prophecy that perhaps what we could do so we are not strictly working off the kindness, and the DeBruhlers have shown up and shared lots and lots of stuff with us on multiple occasions, and they do this for a living, but they've never sent me an invoice, and I would love to have a consulting group on our team that knows this, that we don't, and started off with a relationship, and then, I mean, because even our legal team, I don't think any of them have been around long enough to live through this on our side. But maybe that would be a great first step for us, is to bring in a consultant who lives in this arena and then kind of walk us through the RFP and how do we assemble our development team, and how do we take down the property to not negatively impact that application going forward.
Because it would seem to me that the easiest thing for us to do, if I'm understanding what you wanted to do, is ground lease at zero for them. We own the property, but they build on it and they do what they want. We put in utilities, we put in the access, we do the other things that we can do, not as a partner, but as a true partner, an assistant to that. And I don't know who would own the property. It'd have to be the developer.
Yeah, and we could work through every element of that, and whether it's a housing authority property or City of Norman property, we know, and Lisa and I've had long conversations, we are good at helping grab money and assembling things, but this is something that would require management for the next 40 years. And Lisa, she said she's here 30 years max, so she won't be here to run it to the end. So yeah, our ability to assemble that team, including the development team that would manage this project through its financing life, yeah, we do need to make sure we got the right partners and not say, Lisa, you got to go collect rent again. It's the first. And yeah.
Well, but here's, we'll clarify that. Management, you guys are not gonna have a say in that because OFA requires that the property management company has to have experience.
Yeah.
They're trained, they go through training every 2 years.
Yeah.
It's gonna be, and they've got it done by prior projects. Even though Karen has experience in public housing, she can't be the property management. She can be a co-manager, but she cannot be the primary at the start. It's gonna have to be, so one thing about tax credits, they require the syndicators and investors, they require professionals that work in the industry.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're like, we'll invest millions of dollars, but you're gonna have this team of attorneys that work in this team of CPAs that work in this, property managers that work in this. So that'll take care of some of your property management. But your idea of a lease, we've had some that is sometimes something to think about to make the project feasible. Because in some cases, since the land has to be something that's not eligible basis, so it's a cost to the developer, and sometimes, depending on the number of units, drives whether the deal is financially viable or not. And so if you're thinking of 4% bond deals, I'm going to tell you right now, you better be looking at 100 units or more.
Yeah,
It's gotta be a minimum of $10 million.
I agree.
A minimum of $10 million for it to
Because-
pencil out.
Yeah, otherwise you just can't make it work.
Yeah, you can do 60 units or so with, you know, with 9%
yeah.
credits all day long, but bonds and 4% credits, you need to kind of scale it up a little. Do you have CDBG monies that you can use for the infrastructure? Okay.
Yeah, we have home and CDBG.
Yeah, okay, all right.
And you have to be careful how you add those things in too, because the home program has its own set of rents and it doesn't match
yeah.
those rents.
Yeah,
Of course not.
yeah,
It's-
yeah.
Thanks, federal government.
All these programs fit together, but not like this. It's more kind of like this.
Yeah.
So the more different kinds of money you put in, the more layers of compliance you end up with, because every single one of them has a nuance that's different from the next.
So have you seen that if someone comes in with home money, they can target specific units at a low home rent to get to that averaging?
You have a
can.
choice to either fix or float the units. Yes.
And I would never recommend we do this with the general fund, but we've got ARPA, council said affordable housing is the goal. And what a once in a lifetime opportunity.
100 units, that's really pretty amazing.
That's
It would
not-
make a dent.
How many's in the hotel?
That one's a 61 unit property, and we think it may make sense to have some of the units add doors and turn them into one bedroom units. So maybe 51 units with some one bedrooms and some single room occupancies in that particular approach.
There's also another kind of like fail-safe in there too. It seems like at first blush, well, if we did a small project, maybe that's a good way to get our feet wet. But there's a break point in there where small is too small, then it won't cash flow anymore. So, and that's somewhere around 45 unit.
50's about, right now with the interest rates, I wouldn't go below 50.
But that also depends on the soft money and, you know, how much of the land costs can be eliminated and infrastructure and all those different things.
Well, it's very interesting to me because a lot of the complaint that I get from employers in the city of Norman is we can't afford to have enough people here to work in our stores and in our shops because the rents are too high in Norman, so they have to drive from Moore or Noble. Well, let's figure that out and give them that source that we can do and do those kinds of things that help the businesses keep up their people. And we were talking about elderly people and doing that and building those things in so that people can have places that are decent to live as they age and don't have the
That's
income.
been a common problem across this state for over 20 years. The mismatch between housing and employment. and people commuting right out of town at the end of the day.
We've had employers move, the one lady that sticking in my mind moved to Blanchard because there were more people and more of the kind of people she needed. She was in the carpet cleaning business, so she needed young, good backs. Yeah, she couldn't find them here in Norman. They're all going to school.
One thing you'll have to keep in mind also is since you are in a college town here, you can't use the units for student housing. I mean, you can't have one or two.
You don't need
They got
one.
plenty.
And there are some exceptions and
Everybody
everything
wants to build
that can
student housing.
qualify, but generally speaking and everything, you know, if you were to, you know, not get the occupancy you wanted and everything like that, it might be easy just to march over to the university and say, hey, send some students over here to live here. Nah, can't do that.
We're not overrun with student housing, but
Yeah.
we're fixing to be on the bad end of that curve too. But that's a good developer problem, and they can make the money that comes. Solving a problem for low income housing is a completely different problem and a completely different plate. It's wonderful.
Right.
Any more
And-
questions from council? Oh, sorry.
No, I'm done.
Questions from council?
Just kind of a general question. Is locating a project like this in a TIF area negatively impacted, or does it disqualify us from getting any kind of tax credits?
No,
Since those are also
yeah,
essentially
no.
tax credits for lack of a better term.
No, there are many projects that we have financed that are in TIF areas.
Okay.
Everything, so.
Ms. Canavan, did you want to add to that? Karen, did you want to add?
Oh, I just wanted to kind of, if you don't mind, so I'm going to stand up. Lisa and I met with a couple of developers when we were at a conference, and when I first heard all of this, I'm like, oh my gosh, all these moving pieces, and how do you do this, and how do you do that? Well, we met with two developers, and they pretty well walked in and said, hey, this is me, and I do all that. I've got all my professionals lined up. The tax credit management companies, all the attorneys, when you partner with a developer, he's going to want his fee, but he's going to bring this entourage, and it's almost like once you guys set that wheel in motion, it's going. So, I mean, like I said, when I first heard this, I was going, oh my gosh, this sounds so complicated. I can never wrap my mind around this. How does this really work? But the fact that the developers walk in with that expertise put my mind at rest, but at the same time, because you're going to be negotiating with the developers on what his cut's going to be of this project, you know. So that's where Lisa and I were going, well, somebody could take us to the cleaners and we wouldn't even know it. So, yeah, I mean, it's really that complex. So they're like, well, the De Boers, they're honest, they love us. And they would be good at helping us to broker those deals and make sure that we match up with a developer that understands what the city wants to have accomplished. So I loved your idea on that. But I just wanted to tell you, when the developers walk in, it's like they've already got it all and they really don't want you telling them what to do at that point, because they've done it over and over and over. But I just want to share that.
The one thing I'd like to add to that, though, is you're right, Karen. They will tell you exactly that they're bringing their team in. But as a city, you guys probably have some design features that you may want to be thinking about. Might have income targeting that's important to you as a community. Location might be important to you. The connection to transit might be important. Those are the things that you want to speak up about with that developer, your expectations, or set in your RFP if you decide to go that route. Because you're driving, if you leave it to them, you could end up with a huge high-rise that you didn't want when you wanted duplexes, because that's what they build, and they know what that cost is. The other thing I want to talk about, though, is grants versus loans, because home in the past was given as recently, the OFA has been given as grants instead of loans, and it's caused some problems with some tax credit deals because it's become a taxable event. So like out of a $500,000 grant, for the developer, he's only benefiting $200,000 because the rest of it's going towards his tax liability stuff. So think about that. I know that doesn't sound, it's a nightmare to track payments. I will tell you that. I used to do that. But you might think about a servicing entity if you decide to go that route. You know, do you have someone, a bank, a lender in town that would be willing to service that note? And it can be saw second, like Byron says, a lot of times it might be a balloon at year 15. It might be interest-only payments every year, so they know that they owe you something. So those are some key things, though, to think about when you bring a developer into town. I think the last tax credit deal that was done here was in,
2015, I believe, is Bocage.
and it was a senior elderly deal.
We have not had a family tax credit project forever. We had some various regulatory things that were built into how council approved a potential use to. You had to have a
Resolution of support.
resolution, yeah, that a previous administration, we had a certain kind of ranking criteria that we went through so as we did not concentrate poverty. You know, Daryl has shown the map of how our assisted housing is scattered throughout the city as a result of that. But on the other hand, it really constrained tax credit projects to where the only projects that could get through council were senior projects. So you can't spit without hitting a senior project in this town.
There are
And when you
8
call, they have no waiting list and they have vacancies. But a general occupancy family project, we have not had one of those. Interesting.
Was it Garland?
There was a senior component in Garland.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have 8 tax credit developments, 5 of them are senior, 3 are family.
Wow.
856 units.
Any other questions, council? We see some direction, and we'll be bringing you back some action items. We'll start with a consulting agreement with the DeBruglers, if that works for our city attorney. We'll put that together, bring that to you, and then we'll be able to jump in with both feet.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for all this information.
Daryl, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
Item number 2.
Do you have a card?
Yes, I do.
I'll wait for you guys to see if you're doing that.
You need the computer, right? No, that's okay. Go
I'll
ahead.
send him this meeting link. He sent that like back when we did the.
Hey, Daryl, I'll take one too as well.
Yep, sure. You are now our ability, because Karen said we don't want to get taken, but the
Yeah,
DeBruglers,
yeah,
let's get them
absolutely.
on
Yeah,
board
it's
and then
powerful
say, call this guy.
Yeah.
We'll take advantage.
Thank you.
I know a lot of people, but,
I think we could get the team
I
started.
realize that everybody's ready to roll. This is hopefully going to be a brief presentation basically on the background that has gotten us to this point. And the reason we're giving this presentation is we have another entity that's interested in providing TV and broadband services to residents in Norman. Desi has the benefit of coming pre-name tag, so if you could introduce your other colleague with Blue Peak.
No, it's just me tonight. Desi Stoops, no relation.
Cousin Bobby.
I do like coming to visit Norman. I actually graduated from the other place. My wife actually is a professor down here and is a med school student here at Norman. But no, represent Blue Peak. We're building throughout Oklahoma to the tune of about $500 million within the state. Under construction in Stillwater, Enid, Lawton, Bartlesville, a number of places. Would love to come and bring fiber and put that throughout the entire city of Norman. It'd be about $55–60 million investment. Prior to, the previous discussion was about, credits and assistance from the feds. No, we've self-funded, and this is all private equity that we would pursue.
And that segues into the first slide, which kind of indicates, because Blue Peak has approached us, we have other entities providing what used to be considered cable television, now also includes video streaming. Our other entities, those contracts include what are referred to as favored nation clauses, which basically means and Desi's been through this with me on numerous conference calls, we have to ensure that the contracts basically have similar clauses, because if we change those in a way that appears to be deferential to, say, Blue Peak, then AT&T, OEC, and Cox will come in and say, I'd like that clause as well, and then we end up having to change those agreements. It used to be that cable television was a franchise, which the franchise agreements under the Oklahoma Constitution required a voter approval. Now, those have been, due to various movements at the federal and state level, have become more agreements rather than franchises. So even though they are still non-exclusive, just like franchises were, you no longer have to have voter approval. So it's all on you. And again, it used to be that we were looking at cable television franchise, then agreements, and now we have entities like Blue Peak, OEC, AT&T, which is now given their video streaming service agreement to DirecTV, their affiliate. And so that is the portion that we're looking at, and there is a state statute related to that that does allow municipalities to request certain services and but also limits us in what we can require video streaming services to do. Again, we legislation has the federal legislation has preempted the Oklahoma Constitution that had initially required that these be franchises. That has been determined that they don't have to go to a vote of the people based on federal law. The FCC has also looked at case law that has determined the limitations on what municipalities can put on entities that are wanting to provide video streaming or broadband, again, with a view toward allowing more competition rather than less. So, for instance, this is the Constitution provision that has been overruled by the FCC. What the city can do is we can provide a license for entities to provide streaming services. We provide the permits for their installation and other infrastructure. And we have to, again, because of those favorization clauses, those terms need to be similar for all of the entities providing these services. And again, when they come in for a permit, they have to meet the zoning and the regulations for height and setbacks, so municipalities can control those features. And again, this is the non-sole source clause where we are not limiting who can come in and provide services. The aspect of this is to increase cable television competition, and that has happened. We started with Cox, then we expanded to UVerse, which is now DirecTV, then OEC has come in, and now we have Blue Peak. So there is the reduction in what municipalities can impose in regulations has led to more competition for residents. Again, recent FCC orders have been gearing toward less regulation by municipalities and allowing more competition. And again, the Attorney General opinions have found the same thing. What Oklahoma's requirements for franchises and controls have been loosened in order to allow more competition. I know I'm just kind of scanning through these because if you have any questions on that. So again, the effect of all of these case laws and the Attorney General opinion and the FCC coming in and saying, here's the limitations of what municipalities can do. You can you can require permitting, you can require limits on their infrastructure, but you really need to allow an expansion of competition. Here are basically what the municipalities can do. In the state statute that's still left allowable, you can charge up to 5% of the gross revenue, so that would come to the city of Norman, has payment for access to the right-of-ways in order to put in the infrastructure and access. You can request up to 6 channels for education or governmental programming, but the programming needs to be provided by the educational entity or the city. The streaming and video provider does not have to provide the programming. They still have to do the public safety messages over the emergency alert system. All of them have a standard 90 days in which they can give the city notice that for whatever reason they are wanting to terminate providing services within the city and no longer be covered by the agreement to provide services for the city. There are very stringent statements within the contracts about how they determine what the payment for individuals who are not directly on the line have to pay to connect. And they have to provide similar services and rates to individuals within the service areas that they choose to provide. However, the city cannot say, you will provide services in this area. They get to select what part of the city they will begin expanding their services from. But within those areas, they're required to provide similar packages at similar rates. And I know
One
that's-
problem I've had with utility companies, and particularly those that are running cable as they go, is that they sometimes do a lot of damage to our intersections, to our roads, to our pipe, to our, all kinds of other things. I don't know how much Chris has lost.
Well, no, yeah.
You know, how much pipe have you lost to vibro plows and things like that? There has to be some kind of thing. They did a wonderful job right behind the boomerang, which is a hamburger joint just over here on the side. They tore up that out terribly, and we couldn't get them to fix it.
That's not good.
That's not good. And then from our respect, we spent money to fix what somebody else put in as a shot. How are you going to do that now?
So how we work with Public Works, we'll call all the 911s. If there's aerial OG&E, we'll go on OG&E poles. If it's underground, residential or downtown, we'll do underground boring. We'll work and plan with the city. If it's marked, we don't bury it. But if it's mismarked, that's a liability that
3 feet.
Right. So we use Mears as our construction firm. We're part of the Quanta company, global company. We'll have a number of different engineering firms that work closely with Darrow Public Works, etc. So we plan on notifying as soon as what we do is put signs in neighborhoods 2-3 months before we're coming. We send mailers, we put door tags on a week before we're in a particular neighborhood. Everyone's gonna know, right, that we're gonna be there, because that's part of this is expanding. It's about 500,000 homes that we're building within Oklahoma, about 1 million, 1.2 million people that we're providing to. So this is standard course for us. Now, what we do, we know that there's gonna be a mismark, and we know we're gonna hit a gas line or a sprinkler head. We have a recovery crew. I literally on the drive down here, number of folks in Stillwater, okay, I gotta go and repair a sprinkler line, I gotta move a pedestal, a foot off of because the easement was mismarked. That's standard course. So, and being from, I grew up in Perry, I was born and raised there. We actually do a lot with CMW Ditch Witch, and they're doing, actually building drop bearing machines that are less invasive because of all the projects we've got in the state. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is a perfect partner, because not only can we partner with you, but we know fiber expansion throughout the country continues to go. So we've had them out and do a lot of study. Their engineering group there, good friend, used to work for Ed and Mary when I was in high school on the farm. So we were excited to have that partnership with them and help on the design stuff of a new drop bearing machine. So it's good.
I remember I mentioned we're trying to apply standard clauses, and the contracts do agree or have the clause, this agreement shall not relieve the entity of any existing obligations involved in obtaining permits, pull or conduit space from any department of the city, utility company, or others maintaining utilities in the streets. And Chris can back me up on this, but those agreements usually have clauses or statements in them about renovating or putting the area back into the condition that you found it in.
So if we're contracted with Blue Peak, their contractor is also contracted to fix those things.
Yeah, those are, and that's why I'm looking at Chris, but normally if they go into our right of way, we have, when they get the permit to do that, the requirement is that you, I'm not using the correct term, but that you put the, thank you, you restore it back to the, you see, they know exactly what they're supposed to be doing, that's a good sign. But yes, that's usually standard for receiving a permit to be able to go in and do that.
So we've had preliminary meetings with them in Public Works, and they have agreed to work with us on getting all the right-of-way permits. We'll assign an inspector. We'll be up there following behind them. We'll be there and saying, this isn't quite prepared right. We have done similar items in other neighborhoods, and when AT&T and OEC were expanding. And we'll be working closely with them, but they have said they're going to have someone who's local to Norman that's going to be here to be able to be watching over the project, that will be here directly responsible for the work that's being done within Norman, and we'll have direct contact with them. And they have already said, as he was saying, that they will have flyers out that will be on people's doors, so they'll have a contact number for issues. But Public Works will be working closely with them and watching their construction and making sure that we do get the area restored back as it was before.
Thanks, Scott. Councilmember Hall.
Thanks. So I just want to make sure we, based off of the conversation and that we've had with AT&T the last several years, I don't want to end up in a situation where we are being forced to allow poles all throughout the city against our will, and being forced to allow equipment on our poles against our will, which is the situation we found ourselves in with AT&T. And so if we allowed this in Norman, would we be then saying we're going to open ourselves up to saying you can put your equipment on our stuff, on our poles, and that you can put poles up anywhere you want and things like that?
It's the same agreement that we have with OEC, et cetera, so I would say yes.
Well, the AT&T issue you're talking about is really about the small cell facilities.
Yes, the small
Which is
cell.
something different that the FCC has been
Okay.
promoting and pushing and requiring municipalities to pretty much.
Is it something that Blue
allow.
Peak would be, there would not be in that?
No,
Okay.
No.
we provide fiber to every rooftop in this community, whether it's business, whether it's schools, whether it's homes.
Okay.
We'll have glass fiber to every building. And it's a line, up on a pole or in the ground, not small cell, not cell tower, no.
Would you be putting up your own poles?
No,
Okay.
we'll use
What's-
OG&Es
Okay, okay.
or OECs, or we'll be underground.
Whatever's there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That really answers a lot of my concern about adding another. But then also just, we've had a lot of discussion with staff about the limited space in the right-of-way and the difficulty working in it. Do we have any comment about that staff would like to share?
Thank you for that concern. That is a very major concern for us too. We will be working with them on placement. Of course, we have a lot of people vying for that limited resource we have of our right-of-way and our availability to use it for water and sewer and the infrastructure that we provide, as well as storm sewer and roadways. So it is something that we will be looking at, and we don't have the answer for it right now, but that is something that we're watching, and becoming right-of-way managers is becoming more of a job set and something that we as a community have to be more attuned to. Right now, we kind of have that spread amongst multiple people in the Public Works Department, but the way we manage that right-of-way is becoming more and more critical as it becomes more congested and we have more people vying for that valuable, anywhere from 60 to 100 foot of real estate, and then being able to maintain the infrastructure that the city of Norman has to provide also. So we will be looking at that and working closely with them, but to give you a definite answer right now, I don't really have the today. We are working hard on that.
Thank you.
Councilmember?
I guess at this point, because of both of y'all's questions, this is more of a comment, a general comment about how some entities have chosen to conduct work in the right-of-way. I know that we will hear about this from our residents, so I appreciate hearing that there will be someone local to Norman overseeing this project, that they'll be able to get, if there's any concerns by our residents, to be able to, contact some kind of customer service. I think that's really important because I think we've seen some other entities, using out-of-state entities and it being very difficult for residents to, get concerns and grievances of broken sprinklers or, water meters and things like that on their property. So I just really appreciate hearing that there will be kind of a local component to this that residents can kind of access in a more meaningful way. So both of your concerns were the same thing that I was concerned about.
Be careful of the trees.
Yes.
It can cause some problems.
Yes.
Anyway, anything else from council or from legal?
No, just, again, we wanted to have this meeting to kind of give the background on why, for instance, we had chapter 6, which related to cable television, but because of federal statutes, none of those can really be imposed by municipalities. So chapter 6 has been removed, and we're basically looking at the state statute that was referenced in the presentation. So if there were concerns, we wanted to be here to hear from council before we presented the contract, which would probably be the first meeting in January.
Oh, excellent.
There's no concerns.
Thank you. All right. Well, hearing none, we're adjourned. All right. Thank you all.